morning, everybody, and welcome to this next in the series of Wellbeing of Women webinar. I'm absolutely thrilled that today we're going to be talking about living well with the menopause, not dealing with the menopause or treating the menopause, but living well with it, because this is an inevitability for every woman, and we want to do it as well as we can. So the menopause, which means the ending of periods and reproductive life, usually happens between the ages of about 45 and 55 for the vast majority of women in the world. For some women, it can happen earlier, and for some women, it's a little bit later. But the symptoms of menopause, and there are many, like anxiety and brain fog and muscle pain, can have a massive impact on quality of life. Why are we having this menopause today? Well, we're marking World Menopause Day, and I haven't just got any old one coming along to help me do this and mark this very special occasion. I've got two super experts and a wonderful, well, three experts actually. I've got Dr. Naomi Potter, who is an author and a general practitioner with a special interest in menopause and a British Menopause Society accredited specialist. She's worked to empower women with knowledge so that they can seek help should they need it, and she's hosted many educational resources, and I have a copy of the author of the best-selling book, in fact the Sunday Times best-selling self-help guide for 2022. I do like to give my guests a plug, which she wrote with Lavina Mehta. Here it is. I've turned off my blurred screen just so that you can see it all there, everybody. Lovely. And she established the Menopause Care Clinic that helps women from all over the UK access medical support. Now, stop press. According to Google this morning, it's available on Books for People at the cut price rate, so order now to avoid disappointment. The second guest that I have is Lavina Mehta, who is also an expert in health and well-being. She was awarded an MBE for her services to health and fitness during the COVID-19 lockdown and pandemic, and her mission is, again, to be helping people of all ages feel good physically and mentally, and she's aiming to help reduce the risks of common chronic diseases that we tend to get in our latter years. Menopausal for people of my vintage, but also in men as well, who also suffer from frailty and the need to maintain their physical strength and well-being. And Lavina is also, they're both actually ambassadors for Wellbeing of Women. And then I'm going to move on to Lucy Jones, who on my screen is top right. And she's an award-winning registered Associate Nutritionist, and she qualified with a first-class degree in nutrition, and she focuses on women's health and has invested much of her time and career to supporting women through this menopause transition. So welcome to you as well, Lucy. She hasn't got a book, but I think you should get one, because then I can plug it in the next webinar we invite you to. So that's a task for this year, or perhaps next 2025. So Lucy believes that nutrition doesn't need to be complicated. I would entirely agree. When you get the basics right, it can transform how you feel through the menopause, and then it will avoid you doing those crash diets or trying to take magic potions and devices and drinks and things. And she founded Lutrition, which is her nutrition clinic, in 2021, and then she's since supporting many women going through menopause to eat better. So with that, I'm going to move straight on, because there's so much to talk about, and I have to be very careful with the time, because otherwise the WOW webinar team get all cross with me, and we don't want to be cut off, do we? So let's go to thinking about how we're going to run this and what we're going to say. Just to remind you, the webinar is being recorded, and please use the chat function for comments and for questions. And then just a quick warning to you all to get into your sort of mobile mode. I don't mean telephone, I mean physical mobile mode. Lavina's session is going to include some fun practical demos, which people can opt to do from wherever they are tuned in from, if they would like to. So not compulsory, but it's an optional extra for everybody who's joined the webinar platform today. And of course, we welcome your questions and your comments throughout. So let me just pop over now firstly to Naomi. Tell us a little bit about, Naomi, about your story and how you've become so passionate about all this.
So I'm a GP by training, but with a women's health interest. I did obs and gynae at St Mary's with you a very long time ago, and Not that long ago, not that long ago. And so since then, I always focused on women's health when I was a GP, and then became more and more interested in menopause as I realized how little I knew about it. So I felt like I couldn't serve my patients. So did more training and more training, and then ended up having more patients and more patients, and it kind of snowballed after that. And so I set up a clinic just before, in December 2019, just before lockdown, and then COVID struck, so everything had to be taken online, and it snowballed from there even more. So I started doing little snippets for social media, helping educate women into this area, and then it just, that the rest is history, really. The menopause community bubbled up, and I've met some amazing people there who are all kind of championing women and menopause, and that's what led me to be here.
And then she read to our audience, and then she wrote the book with Davina McCall called Menopausing. So now this is the big question. So HRT, tell us about all this in a nutshell. Tell us about, I think, really the safety and the effectiveness for treating symptoms that most women that I meet in my professional capacity worry about. And then they're quite amazed when I actually usually dispel many of their fears and anxieties.
That's the thing, isn't it? I think so HRT is hormone replacement therapy, and we use it very effectively to treat menopausal symptoms. And it's the gold standard in treating menopausal symptoms, as long as there's not a reason why you can't take it. The modern HRTs that we use, so the estrogen through the skin and the micronized progesterone and the Mirena coil, they're all very safe. So I think a lot of women worry about HRT causing breast cancer, and they may have had women in their lives who have taken HRT and then developed breast cancer. And in everybody's heads, it's the HRT that has caused that breast cancer, when in fact what we know is that breast cancer, unfortunately, is very common, and being on HRT is very common, and you're only ever on HRT first and then get breast cancer. It's never the other way around. So there is, in people's minds, there's this causation that we think really isn't the case, certainly not for the modern HRTs that we use in the doses that we use it at. So it's a very safe, effective way of reducing and sometimes eliminating menopausal symptoms and transforming quality of life, with some added health benefits a lot of the time as well.
And I think that's such an important point about the breast cancer, because it's almost like a visceral reaction, isn't it, that all women have? Oh my goodness, that's sort of destroying my femininity, etc. So just for the audience benefit, because I talk about this many times, I've had breast cancer several times, and I absolutely know that I'm much better to be taking my HRT, and I still am, and no one's going to take it off me. So I think that's a personal recommendation. But there are some other women who are not able to take HRT, and I think that the developments that you've been commenting on, Naomi, the transdermal approach and the micronized progesterone, and particularly the Mirena coil, have been so helpful also for women who've had thrombotic problems and cardiovascular disease. So could you tell our audience a little bit about that, please?
So there's lots and lots of kind of communities of women who have been told, for whatever reason, that they cannot take HRT. And one big group of women is those who have had blood clots. So they're called DVTs, or deep vein thrombosis, PEs, or pulmonary emboli. And because oral estrogen is known to make blood a bit more sticky, people had drawn the conclusion that the same is true of estrogen through the skin. And actually, it's not the case. So we safely give transdermal estrogen to women who have had previous clots. Now, if you've got concerns yourself, and you might be under the care of a hematologist, or you may have been told that you can't have HRT in general, it's worth seeking the advice of a specialist to have that confirmed, because there are some instances where it is worth getting another hematological opinion, but there are a big group of women who are wrongly told that they can't use HRT. And the same with women with high blood pressure, the same with obese women. Actually, transdermal HRT can be really beneficial in these groups of women.
Exactly, and I'm glad you mentioned about obesity as well, because what I think is also very striking, and I know my patients go, what? Is when I explain to them, if we look at the number of cases of breast cancer and thrombosis, that in fact being very overweight is a far greater risk than taking HRT or anything else that might increase clotting tendencies. So it's not good to be overweight for all sorts of reasons, because we become less mobile, so everything becomes exaggerated, and also because, as I say, you have more problems with those disorders. Now, other medical treatments then, you've mentioned some of the reasons why women can't do it, but what would you then advise them for those rare but important ladies who will doubtless be tuning in today because they probably think, well, that's what they would like to hear about more. What would you advise them to take or do?
So there are lots of other options, and they're divided really into the medical options and the lifestyle options. So in terms of medical options, there's specific medications that we can use to treat specific symptoms. So for example, if mood is an issue, then we can use antidepressants. If hot flushes and night sweats are an issue, then there's a couple of classes of drugs that we can use there. We can often use topical estrogens, even if you can't use systemic estrogens. We can use topical estrogens for urinary tract infections, vulvovaginal symptoms. So there's lots of medical options. But in addition, there's types of therapy. So we sometimes recommend the use of CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, which can be very effective in reduction of a whole host of symptoms, not just those associated with mood or anxiety, but even hot flushes and night sweats, CBT can help with. But I think one area that kind of almost sounds a little bit cliched is the lifestyle modifications that actually you can make yourself without going anywhere near a doctor. I think sometimes when you have debilitating symptoms, there can be a tendency to self-medicate with things like alcohol and coffee and sugar and becoming sedentary. And you can end up getting into a vicious cycle whereby you feel anxious, so you drink quite a lot of wine, so you don't sleep properly, so the next day you're knackered, so you drink loads of coffee. And then you get into that vicious cycle that you can't get out of. And by having that recognition that the behaviors that you are following are actually making your symptoms far worse can be really enlightening. And just by making some subtle shifts in those, in what you do for yourself, can make an enormous difference.
Yeah, so true, and thank you for putting it so succinctly, because of course you and I as medics, we've stayed up a bit longer, haven't we? Had the extra coffee the next morning to shake ourselves up to meet a deadline, and then relax with too many glasses of wine that night. So I'm fessing up to that because I think that's quite important. Now, there are a couple of questions in the chat, and I think we'll address those as well, about women who've gone along to their GP and they felt that they have been a bit shortchanged, to summarise, if I may. So what would you say to them? I often tell women that I see, or friends, that I'm talking to in a social context, well, write down your questions and then persist, go back again, say, no, I'm not happy with this. What would you say to them, Naomi?
I would agree. I think it helps everybody if you write things down, especially if you're feeling a bit emotional or a bit forgetful. Having something just written down on paper, you can almost just hand it over and say that this is how I'm feeling. Taking somebody with you can be really powerful because it just gives you that extra bit of confidence in a consultation that you might be a bit apprehensive about going to. And also, I think one thing that works really well is if you go to a GP practice where you have choice, then either finding a GP with an interest in women's health, or the GP registrar who's fairly newly qualified, often much more up to date, also really interested about expanding their knowledge. They can be really useful places to head to if you've been knocked back the first time.
Yes, really helpful. Thank you. And so important to do that, particularly having the person to go with you, not as a minder, but as another pair of ears, because I think sometimes all of us, when we're talking about our health, as you say, it is an emotional, it's stressful. And I certainly tend to have selective hearing when people are talking about it. So that's a really helpful way forward as well. And I think I must also give a plug here for the Department of Health, their proposals with NHS England to develop women's health hubs, where we hope that we will only have people in those who are really interested in women's health. And can I just remind the audience that they don't necessarily have to be place-based. You can join things online, support groups, webinars such as this, where you can learn an enormous amount and feel really quite empowered to start off on your journey again. So look out for your women's health hubs. There's one in every one of the integrated care boards around England now. and I think we need to create the demand. That's what I'm saying to the women I know and all of the women in the population. We need to create the demand and we'll scale them up. So thank you very much indeed. Would you like to make any comments? I know Lavina and Lucy are the experts on nutrition, but from your point of view as a general practitioner and a menopause specialist, what would you say before we move on to Lavina?
I mean, I thought your point about obesity was really, really important, in that obesity increases the incidence of practically every illness or condition that we know. And in terms of risk of breast cancer, it is far, far higher than the risk of taking HRT, and how HRT can then reduce that risk of obesity. So it's all kind of wrapped up into one. But nutrition is, and so nutrition kind of goes hand in hand with obesity, and it's about making yourself aware of what healthy choices are. You don't have to starve yourself in order to be slim. It's about knowing what foods you can really, really fill up on, that are, you know, unprocessed whole grains, pulses, beans, fruit and vegetables, rather than going for kind of quick fixes or processed foods that can make you put weight on without even you know, feeling full. So it's just about making those choices and knowing where sugar hides. So sugar, it can be so hidden that you don't even necessarily taste it or get the benefit from it. But like sugary drinks, particularly, where you don't feel full from drinking, you know, a number of teaspoons of sugar if you have a sugary drink. So just by making tiny, tiny changes, you can make a massive difference.
Great, thank you, Naomi. And I'm going to address a few of the questions. And first one from Michelle, who says, I hope this isn't a stupid question. Michelle, I need to tell you, as someone who's been in medicine for as long as I have, no question is a stupid one. It's important to ask it. So you were saying you didn't have a period for 10 months and then you were told you were perimenopausal. You started HRT in February, but since then you've been getting a period every month. Well, I think we need to get you linked up with Naomi for some details about the type of HRT you're taking. But it's quite common on HRT for women to have regular withdrawal bleeds on a monthly basis if they haven't been amenorrheic, so had absent periods for a year or more. Very important, though, that you clock this and make sure that you're using sufficient progesterone to protect the endometrial lining. But rough rule of thumb is that if you're having regular periods and they're not changing or being erratic or complicated by intermenstrual bleeding between the cycles or changing in any way, that things are probably okay. But do go along and talk to your GP or your local women's health hub or whatever to get further advice about that. But no, there's nothing serious going on, particularly if it's normal. And then comments about memory seriously affecting my performance at work. Well, yes, don't I know it? That's one of the reasons I had to go on HRT, because I just felt in a fog all the time. So very important. So are there any other things you'd like to flag up, Naomi, in addition to the benefits of estrogen for memory deficit?
I think one of the important things to remember is that brain fog does not mean that you have Alzheimer's or dementia. And because I think that's what most women worry about, and they are serious, really, really worried about it. It does not mean that you are dementing or losing it. Often it will just get better over time, but it can take really quite a long time. Women tend to notice it in that perimenopausal kind of hormonal turbulence, and then postmenopausally, whether they are on HRT or not, it does tend to improve for most women. But HRT in particular can, as Lesley has said, it can really help.
Yeah, really has. It can be a savior. I know so many people, or so often when I'm talking to women, they will tell me about the symptoms they've heard most about, and then I'll say, how's your sleep pattern? And they'll say to me, how did you guess? I thought, well, because I've been there before. I know what it's like. Okay, so there's lots of questions here about weight gain and perimenopause. I wonder if you'd just like to touch on that, Naomi, before I move on to Lavina.
So weight gain is unfortunately very common, and I think it's something that women find really hard. You know, as well as their physical symptoms, their bodies are changing, their body shape is changing. That again, with like the loss of fertility, it can be really kind of distressing and emotional. We know that with aging, we gain weight, and with estrogen loss, we gain weight, and particularly around the middle, so around your, around your organs. And there, to a certain degree, that your body will change. Like that, you can't fight the aging process, but so using HRT can help, but also by making lifestyle modifications and really focusing on exercise and a healthy diet. And it's amazing how your body can improve no matter your age. It's not necessarily downhill all the way.
Yes, no, I mean, I'll share with the audience as well. And when I was in my 30s and something was a little bit tight, I used to miss an odd meal. I know I shouldn't say that. I used to miss an odd meal and I'd be into it by Saturday night and the party. But now it takes a much, much longer time to shift those extra pounds. So I have to work hard at exercising so that I don't put on the extra pounds. So Lavina, over to you. You've got some lived experience, I think, of navigating perimenopause. So shall we start with that before we go on to talk about your exercise and movements?
Sure. So I actually didn't realize I was in perimenopause. It's actually at the same time that I kicked off a very unplanned new career. I qualified as a personal trainer at the age of 40. I'm now 46, and I'd given up my corporate career. I'm a mum to 3 amazing boys. And looking back, it was probably from around the age of 39, which is actually, something I always highlight, that South Asian women and different ethnicities will go through the menopause at different ages. And we know there's such a lack of research and education and representation on women's health, but it's looking like 5 or 6 years earlier for South Asian women than the average white female. So like you mentioned at the beginning, if that age for the white female in the UK is around 51, my menopause is very in line with that, because I'm going through it now at the age of 46, and my symptoms started, in my late 30s. And like you've already touched on, I had a lot of brain fog. I just qualified as a personal trainer. I started going live twice a day during the pandemic. I was doing things out of my comfort zone. I felt like I was losing my memory. I had constantly the family and my boys and my husband especially saying, you're forgetting things. And I did worry about early onset dementia, because my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and it's one of those health topics that's still a taboo in my community. And I'm obviously raising awareness as an ambassador for Alzheimer's Society as well. But it was brain fog. I also started getting quite anxious, and I'd never experienced anxiety. I, was in a very demanding corporate role in my 20s. But when I started feeling that chest tightness and almost, that terrible sort of feeling where I was feeling like my confidence was going, I also had very erratic menstrual cycles. So that was probably, the thing that threw me off the worst. And I was also trying to provide workouts, and, gym gear and light isn't the best for when you've got periods that start changing. And I did suffer with my sleep. I put that again down to just being a mum and, starting off something new. So I only joined the dots when, we started really hearing about the awareness, and I watched the Channel 4 documentary. And it was at that point that I realized that I was in perimenopause, and I went straight onto Instagram the next morning in tears, declaring that, I'm like 42, 43, I think at the time, and that I'm in perimenopause. It was a word that I had never heard of. And, menopause was also a topic that was never really discussed in my household. My mum kind of just trooped on, and like a lot of, our mums, I think, probably didn't realize at the time. So I've been navigating my menopause, symptoms through really the exercise and lifestyle changes that I really feel are the fundamental, like the foundation. Whether you're on HRT or not, we all need to really make sure that we're investing in our midlife health. There's a quote in my book about how midlife health is the greatest predictor of our long-term health. And there's so many things that I'm trying to break the barriers around. When it comes to movement, exercise, lifestyle changes, I want them to break the barriers that are so common, where women don't have time, we don't have the energy, we don't have the motivation. and I want them all to be free tools as well.
Lovely. Okay. I'm just going to mention here Andrew Butler, because I want to promote the importance of male allyship in this journey through improving women's health. And he's saying that as a male line manager for ladies, he wants to know how to best tell them that he's going to be support them and that he will be listening, and comments that he's watched the Davina documentary and is worried about how many women leave work because of no support and how much he values their contribution. So I would say, Andrew, if I may, and please don't feel got at that I'm singling you out, but I wanted you to know I'd noticed your question. Go onto the Wellbeing of Women website, and you can get hold of a lot of tools and resources there. The Menopause Workplace Pledge is something that you can sign up to for free. And also you can talk to the team at Wellbeing of Women, who've actually got an employer's membership package, an EMP, that we're working on to do exactly what you're doing, whether it's for a large company, a medium one, or a small one. So thank you for that question. So Lavina, I think you're going to give us a few tips, weren't you? I've got myself all ready to go here. So perhaps you could take us through a few of things that we could do, even sitting at our chairs or standing up at our desktops here. So over to you for a moment, because we're about halfway through now, so we can get all of our audience moving around a little bit.
Amazing. So just to point out, my concept is exercise snacking, which Lesley has very beautifully demonstrated at a big event we were in London, probably about a year and a half ago now, Lesley. And I try and provide, these exercise snacks are a great, I feel, solution, especially for women going through the menopause, because it's proven by science that short bite-sized amounts of movement, as short as a minute, actually do count, and they can be as effective, even more effective than the hour-long workout that we sometimes struggle to fit in. And you're right, I do say every 30 minutes, and that's backed by research. If we can just move for a couple of minutes, every 30 minutes or at least an hour, it's going to reduce the amount of time that we're sitting, and it's going to hopefully boost your mood and energy levels and productivity if you're in the workplace. So we're going to just go through my feel-good fitness prescription. I'm going to do one little quick snack from every little bit. One of them being, we're probably all at this point sitting and rounding our backs. My children do it when they're gaming or they're using their phones. Lesley's already straightened her back, and you've got my book there, Lesley. There's a 1-minute desk reset snack, which thank you so much, has proved very popular with up to the age of 100, which join my free workouts every week. We're going to try and lift our shoulders up towards our ears, then back an inch or two, and then down the spine. So what we've done is use the analogy of a desk. So every time you see your desk, you could just adjust your spine, your posture. You're probably sitting a little bit taller, so bringing them up, back and down. We're trying to reverse this kyphosis of the spine. It's going to help with neck issues, hopefully makes you feel taller, a bit more confident, and hopefully start engaging your stomach muscles as well. And then we can add in a little bit of mobility, because I have quite a holistic approach to exercise. And one of the best ways I feel just seated is to add in some lovely head circles, which you can do at any time, just ease out any tension, any neck pain. So hopefully you can connect your breath, because breath work, I call the breath snacks, are really good at alleviating anxiety and kicking in our parasympathetic nervous system. So just by taking some long, deep breaths, so we could add in some neck circles, you could even add in some shoulder circles. So moving your shoulders round and getting the joints moving, so lubricating our joints, because we know that joint pain is a very common symptom, and actually motion is lotion when it comes to things like joint pain and osteoporosis. So we can try and move maybe our elbows round. We're drawing like big circles with our elbows. I'm getting to do all of this seated, but anyone watching, please stand up, because standing is obviously better than sitting. But you could do these when you're at your desk, when you're stuck, on your sofa for long periods watching TV at night. And then I add in a little bit of what I call cardio snacks, and they can be low impact. They don't have to be HIIT as such, which is higher intensity movements. I personally love a bit of getting on just our steps in. So you can literally get your steps in while you're seated. You can't see me at the moment, but do check out, you know, all the workouts I do with my amazing mother-in-law are saved on my YouTube channel, and there's lots of snacks in the book as well. But I'm marching, and then I could add in my best stress reliever. So Lesley, are you up for some boxing here? You're just gonna literally punch out all your worries and your stresses. Everyone joining, you're not on camera, so just enjoy it. And what I do recommend,
everyone looking idiotic, do I?
I know, well, I do it all the time, but what I do recommend is some baked bean tins, which make some perfect weights, because I think we will talk about the importance of strength training. Just moving on, very quick snack that I would love everyone to do, even if it is just standing up. If you're able to stand, I would love you just, I call them sit and stands, but like a squat, you could then add some weights, so stick a rucksack by your desk, and you could get up for 10 sit and stand or squats just off your chair every hour. And if you can't stand, I would just suggest lifting your leg, one leg off the ground, like a simple leg extension where you're starting to use the muscles in your front thigh. You can add a hold in, or even some simple heel raises. So all I'm doing right now, we could all do this and no one would even notice, is lifting my heels off the ground. And this is a great way to absorb excess blood sugar as well, because your soleus muscle is a brilliant little muscle there. So you could do that in restaurants. I always say move after meals. But strength training is really important. So press ups at your desks, maybe some dips off your chair, maybe some lunges when the kettle's boiling. So tying it into existing habits as well is a great way to get these little exercise snacks in. I always demonstrate balance work, but I will give you all a challenge to do that yourself. One of the snacks in my book is about a study that shows that if you're able to balance just for 10 seconds on one leg, it can reduce our risks of 1 in 10 premature deaths in the next decade. And I know that's quite morbid, but it's quite an important one, which I try and do with anyone that's mobile. We can build up with different brackets depending on your age. I do it when I'm brushing my teeth. So it's literally part of my habit now. I stand on one leg and brush my teeth for about a minute on each side. And we know about our risks of falls as we age as well, and the amount of hip fractures that are so common. And then the last one, we're going to just do a practical one. It's a bit of self-love, which I feel is really important when we're going through so much in midlife. It's about little things that we can do, and we're going to use a little stretch. So if you've done yoga, it's like a seated cat-cow. We're just going to open our arms really out, take a big positive inhale, almost lift your chin and arch your back. It's lovely doing this standing as well. And then all I encourage you to do is to give yourself a lovely, what I call feel-good hugs, which I invented in my workouts in the pandemic. You're rounding your back, so you're opening out your vertebra, you're bringing your chin to your chest, almost like a C shape. But most importantly, you've got the power of touch, you're releasing the love hormone oxytocin, and hopefully you're giving yourself a little bit of self-love, because I feel that self-care is really important, especially through menopause. So a quick little run through the feel-good fitness prescription.
Lovely, thank you very much. Now, Lucy, over to you. You're going to follow those two acts. That's not very fair, is it? But I think you'll be able to blow it out the park as well. Off you go. So eating well and strategies to manage common symptoms of the menopause, like hot flushes and sleep problems.
Yeah, so obviously let's start with the hot flushes then, because you just mentioned those. There's a couple of different things we can really look at diet-wise to help with hot flushes. One of those is we can look towards alcohol and caffeine, as Naomi's already kind of brought up earlier today. And we do have some research that indicates that caffeine and alcohol can be triggers for hot flushes for some women. Now, the best way to really identify if that's the case for you is to eliminate them out of your diet for, I'd say, at least 4 weeks. That's at least a good chance to figure out if it's going to improve your symptoms. At the same time, you want to make sure that you are monitoring any changes to your symptoms, so any changes to the severity of the hot flush or the frequency of it. And then after those 4 weeks, or even a little bit longer, maybe 8 weeks, I'd reintroduce them one at a time, so that if your symptoms or your hot flushes do start to return or they start to get worse, you can identify which one it is. If you introduce both at the same time, you're going to be just as confused what was the trigger, alcohol or caffeine, or is it both? Now, if your symptoms or hot flushes have improved when you've taken those out of your diet, that's a pretty good indicator that it was alcohol or caffeine. And obviously, if those do return, again, that's a really good indicator. And what this does is it can empower you to then have that knowledge about what is leading towards or contributing towards at least of those hot flushes. And so it gives you that kind of power to make decisions that on a Friday night, you might enjoy that glass of red wine with your friends, or you might have that coffee out. But if your hot flushes suddenly get much worse, you understand what's triggered that. And you might then choose on some days that you're not going to have those because you've got something coming up and you don't want to have to manage those hot flushes. Something else that we also know about hot flushes is there's a bit of research linking back soya-based foods towards reducing the severity of hot flushes in some women. The research around this is incredibly mixed. I read just as many research papers that say soya helps hot flushes, and I read just as many that say it doesn't help. But essentially, the reason why we're linking soya towards hot flushes is that they contain phytoestrogens. And phytoestrogens, it basically stands for plant estrogens. They're plant compounds that have a weak estrogen-like effect in the body. So it's thought that if we consume soya that's got these phytoestrogens, and one type is called isoflavones, might be able to help with managing hot flushes. Now, as I said, the research towards this is incredibly mixed, and there's no promises that if you start eating soya that it is going to help your hot flushes. But if it's something you want to try out, firstly, I'd make sure it's safe for you to do so. And if you're going to do it, about 2 servings of soya every day for about 3 months minimum. That's going to give you a really good chance to see if that's going to have an impact. In terms of what 2 servings of soya looks like, that is going to be maybe 500 milliliters of soya milk, 250 milliliters of soya milk, and then 200 grams of soya yogurt as well, or 100 grams of tofu, tempeh, or edamame. So this is 2 servings every day for 3 months. And please make sure if you're doing that you are monitoring your symptoms. There's no point doing all of this to get to the end of the 3 months and not actually know if it's made that difference. So that's what we can do in terms of hot flushes. Another symptom that I often hear a lot of people coming to me about as well is kind of insomnia and struggling with sleep. I know that's a massive issue that a lot of women experience going through menopause. Now, I wish I could sit here today and say there's a singular food that's going to make you have the best night's sleep ever, but I just can't do that. But what we can do is actually look towards some of our eating habits. So I often recommend that people stop eating 2 to 3 hours before sleep. This is going to allow you the chance to digest your food properly, let gravity do its work, and prevent things like indigestion and bloating, which can disrupt the quality of sleep. But also, if you're eating late at night, often our food choices aren't the best. They're things like chocolate, cakes, crisps, very sugary foods. That's going to cause a spike in our energy levels just before we go to sleep. And that's not what we want when we're trying to sleep. We want our energy levels to sort of be dipping to some extent so we feel sleepy. Something else that I also recommend is that people stop drinking caffeine around 2 p.m. Caffeine is a stimulant. It's going to make you alert, and it stays in the body much longer than most people realize. So drinking caffeine late into the day, if you're relying on a lot of coffee, a lot of caffeine to keep you awake and energized, it might be kind of having a knock-on effect of disrupting your sleep. So as Naomi described earlier, you're then waking up in the morning and having to rely on more coffee to get you through the day. So let's kind of make 2 p.m. a good cutoff, just so we can get rid of a lot of that caffeine, so you've not got a stimulant running around your body when you're trying to sleep. Something else though that I want to talk about, we've spoken about hot flushes and sleep, and these may be the things that you're noticing day to day that are really bothering you, but there are things going on at menopause in your body that we just don't see, and one of those is what's happening to your bones, and the risk of osteoporosis increases at menopause. And osteoporosis, for those of you who don't know, is just when your bones become weak, more prone to breaking. Now, the reason for this increased risk of osteoporosis is because the rate of bone loss increases as we start to lose estrogen. Now, fortunately, I love talking about osteoporosis because there's so much that we can do through our diet to help prevent and manage it. And there's 2 things I want to talk to you about. So the first thing that we can do is really address our calcium intake and make sure we're getting enough calcium. We know from a very young age that calcium is important for strong bones. So making sure you're having about 3 servings of dairy or calcium fortified dairy alternatives each day, it's going to give you a really good amount of calcium, about 85% of your calcium requirement each day. And a serving of dairy might look like 200 millilitres of milk, 125 grams of yogurt, or 30 grams of cheese. What a great excuse to eat cheese. We can also find calcium in other foods, so things like tin sardines with bones. We've got calcium set tofu, as well as some green leafy vegetables like broccoli, kale, and spring greens as well. But it's not just calcium that's really important for our bones. There's another nutrient, and this is vitamin D. And vitamin D helps calcium absorption. And often at this time of year, if you look outside the window, there's not much sun. And when there is sun, like there is today for me at least, it's not very strong. And we rely on vitamin D to produce to be the main source of our vitamin D in the UK. But when the sun's not strong enough between kind of October and early April, we are recommended by Public Health England to supplement with a 10 microgram or 400 international unit vitamin D supplement. Now, some women may be recommended to supplement all year round, and some women may need a higher dose than that, and that's going to be dependent on what your doctor tells you, potentially from a blood test. But vitamin D supplements are widely available from supermarkets and drugstores, and it is this time of year where everyone really needs to be taking one, particularly at menopause, because it is so important for your for absorbing calcium. A source of calcium that I didn't actually mention, and I want to talk more about it actually, is bread. Bread surprisingly contains some calcium, and so many women will sit with me and they're really upset that they feel like they can't eat bread or carbs anymore at menopause. So I just want to touch on this before I kind of finish up. And it is absolutely okay to eat carbs like bread or pasta at menopause. This doesn't change at all. And carbs are actually really important for us. Carbs are broken down into glucose, which is a type of sugar that basically fuels all our bodily functions. So it's so important that we're providing our body with its main fuel source. But also carbs are sources of other nutrients like our calcium, but also B vitamins, which help with our energy levels. And if you're struggling with sleep at menopause, actually making sure you're getting carbs that are going to give you the energy and the nutrients you need to feel a bit more energized is going to be really important. And I think the misconception around carbs being bad for you at menopause really comes down to probably portion size. A lot of women were worried that carbs are leading to weight gain, but when we're mindful of how much carb we're eating, we can absolutely fit that into our diet. And so what I recommend to people is to eat a cupped hand worth of carbohydrates at every single meal. And that's going to allow you to indulge in the carbs that you really like and get that kind of satisfaction from that kind of the taste. But also you're not overdoing it, so you're being mindful of your portions. And something else to think about is the type of carbohydrate you're eating. Whilst our white breads and our white pastas can taste delicious, if we can focus on getting our whole grains in, that's going to be really good for numerous reasons, but particularly because of the amount of fiber you're going to get. Fiber is important because it keeps us full, it keeps our energy levels up, but it also keeps us regular on the toilet. And none of us want to be feeling constipated when we've got everything else going on at menopause. So opt for your whole grains where you can, and it can be really simple. It can be swapping white rice for brown rice, white bread for wholemeal bread or seeded bread, or even white pasta for whole wheat pasta. So all of these swaps can be nice and simple, and hopefully everything I've just spoken about now seems quite simple. It's not too complicated. Nothing is rocket science, but if you can master the foundations and get those right, it really can transform how you feel. And I recommend taking it step by step and just focus on one thing at a time and get that good before you focus on the next thing.
Thank you very much, Lucy. That's some very practical tips. And it's always nice to hear that delicious rye bread and things are actually very good for you, isn't it? It's one of my failings, I think. I don't mind the cakes, but rye bread and things like that are lovely. Now, I think there's a couple of questions, and Naomi's had to leave us for another urgent appointment. A couple of questions here that I would like to make sure I've answered, because they're very relevant and I expect many people are worried about them. So in the light of the Panorama programme last week, there's concerns about higher dose HRT for women who aren't absorbing transdermal well. And one of our listeners, one of our attendees is worried that her higher dose of HRT is not going to protect her uterine lining. And My suggestion, this will actually be the answer to several other questions as well, is that if you choose to go and have a Mirena coil fitted, then you can change your dosages of estrogen and or testosterone if you were using that as well, without worrying about the need to protect the womb lining from getting thickened. So I would certainly consider that as an option. And then also questions about coming off HRT, a GP saying, oh, you've got to come off in 6 months. Well, I don't want to contradict the advice you're getting to the lady who's asked that question, but I don't think there's any evidence that you have to come off it in 6 months' time if you're finding it helpful. I would argue that you can continue on it for quite a long period of time, if not infinitely, or without definitively for a long period of time. Because I think that the benefits for many women can greatly outweigh any small risks. And then there's a lot of questions here about women who are going through the perimenopause and perhaps have got a Mirena coil in, which in many women stops their periods completely. And they're asking, one lady was asking about, well, she doesn't know where she is in her cycle. Well, I would argue that if you're not having irregular bleeding and you're feeling better because of the estrogen you're taking and your Mirena is protecting your womb lining, then I wouldn't worry about your cycle at all. The other thing about the Mirena, of course, is that if some women who are perimenopausal and worried about having an unplanned pregnancy, and Mirena coils are one of the most effective forms of long-acting reversible contraception. So I hope I've managed to cover quite a few of those medical questions. Just a message from the Wellbeing team to those of you who are asking about the employer resources on our website. You may be interested in the toolkit, which is now a new and really rather effective and very valuable resource for so many people, and is available on the website. So let me just go back then to, in the last 5-10 minutes that we've got here, are there other things that you've picked up, Lavina and or Lucy, as you're going through the questions? I'm trying very hard to skim through them, but I always feel that my priority on this has to be to listen to our speakers. So give a shout if there's things that I've missed and that you think that we need to flag up for our very engaged audience. And may I say that we've still got 285 people on it, and at one point we had 350. So you've attracted quite an audience, ladies. So I'm very grateful to you about that. So I think you raised your hand, Lavina. Please carry on.
Yes, I think, just looking at lots of comments that have come in, and generally when I hear, what common symptoms women are going through, and we've touched on the weight gain, and I think Naomi explained it beautifully, especially when I realized myself that as estrogen levels start declining, it's actually the abdominal area, so around your stomach, where your body is actually producing some estrogens there. So it's actually quite amazing. I always put it as like a way of looking at how our bodies are very intuitive, and the beauty of science, where we're actually doing something very clever to try and hold on to the limited amount of estrogen that our body has. But I think what I'd love to point out, Lesley, is the importance of strength training for so many reasons. So we know that as we go through the menopause, our body's sensitivity to insulin starts to decline. So we become more insulin resistant, and that can also contribute to that weight gain. It can also affect your blood sugar management. So I know if there's a roller coaster of blood sugars, how that affects my mood, my energy levels, my productivity, even things like brain fog. So touching on how important strength training is, that in terms of blood glucose management, the more muscle mass that you have, it's really amazing that it just ends up soaking up and really mopping up all the excess blood sugars. Strength training is super important for, we've touched on the fact that we start losing our muscle mass and our bone density, and it's really after the age of 30. So I love pointing out for women that are younger, if you've got daughters, if you've got nieces, to try and encourage all women. I wish I had started a little bit earlier, it was in my mid-30s, but I also point out it's never too late. It's really important that we try and reduce our risks of sarcopenia, because we know that muscle mass starts declining, and it really starts becoming more exponential during the menopause, that we lose even more muscle mass every year. For things like osteoporosis, so for our bone density, our muscles and bones are so interconnected that exercise, especially strength training where you're loading on weight-bearing exercises, are great for our bones. The other thing I love pointing out is some amazing things like myokines. I don't know if you've heard of those, Lesley. They're these magical chemicals that get released, and they're almost these hope molecules. So when we're doing things like lifting weights, and that can just be your body weight to start off with, you know, just doing squats and sit and stands, just body weight, but then progressively overloading, which I think is the key on your journey. Be very kind to yourself and increase weight gradually. But these magical chemicals called myokines get secreted, and they're great for anti-inflammatory, antidepressants. We know that mood is one of those things, our mental health. I think it's 9 out of 10 women go through some sort of mental health change during the menopause, and that can lead on to things like depression. So it boosts your cognition, it helps with your blood sugar levels, it helps with your metabolism, it even helps to kill cancer cells. And there's also an amazing thing I'll quickly touch on, BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is it's like this fertilizer for your brains. And I always talk about alertness, you know, concentration, energy, but also boosting our brains. So keeping our brains fit as we age, because we know that exercise and physical activity is one of the best ways to reduce our risks of dementia and Alzheimer's. It's actually up to about 30 to 40% just through exercise. And if you combine that with all the other lifestyle changes like eating well, nourishing our bodies, increasing our amount of protein, especially when you're strength trained, I think protein is really important, and it helps to satiate you. So you're less likely to binge and reach out some of the sugary stuff that we sometimes crave. Sleep is very important, but sleep can be, you know, kind of an issue that we battle with. So bringing in things like mindfulness, journaling, breathing techniques, maybe just some gentle stretches before bed to help maybe improve and relax your body. And social connection, Lesley, I found, you know, in the research that I've done when I was writing, is one of the most important things. It's webinars like this, getting people together, this sense of community that Wellbeing of Women is really providing. And I think that's really important for women to know, that you are not alone and you can thrive through this period.
Exactly. Thank you for that very positive take. I too am an incurable optimist, and I find it just much better way to go about things. So that's lovely. Now there's a lady here, and I'm going to pick it up before I move on to Lucy, saying that her GP had recently told her that the risks of breast cancer were much higher than we've suggested. Now, as I said, I think it's always very difficult when you get conflicting advice. I don't like it, so I'm sure that none of the ladies I care for don't like it either. But my suggestion, and this is to Deborah Blythe, Deborah, if you've got the time and you're still here, my suggestion is that you go onto the British Menopause Society website, and they've got some lovely, very simple infographics there where they actually put a figure or document the quantum impact of all these various things are to the numbers of cases of breast cancer. And you will see that there's a very small but finite increase in the cases of breast cancer with hormone replacement therapy with estrogen, but it doesn't increase the death rate or deaths from breast cancer, primarily, I think, because women are usually being monitored, and you should be being monitored whether you're on HRT or not, with regular 3-yearly mammograms. So I would suggest that you go and get those, and then further down on that same website, you'll see the same infographic, but then there's an awful lot, a much larger percentage of women having risks with weight gain and with a variety of other things. So I think if you go and take that along to your GP, then you'll be able to give them the information they need, not to give that advice, which I'm afraid is a bit misleading. But I always think that if you want to change the hearts and minds of people you're talking to, it's best to help them and give them a way to go forward. So if you provide them with that detail, British Menopause or BMS website, or you can email us at Wellbeing of Women, and I'm sure we can help you and find you the link which we can send to you, and then you can print it out for your GP. So Lucy, any little extra gems that you'd like to give us before we wind this up? Because we've got about 6 or 7 minutes left now.
Yes, I've been seeing a lot of questions coming in about supplements. Like, there's been loads. I can't answer them all, but I think let me just speak very generically about supplements. There are a lot of supplements. If you go onto Google, if you go into the shops, it is really overwhelming as a nutritionist, and I can't imagine what it's like, how overwhelming it feels if you don't understand the nutrition, the field of nutrition even. What I will say is kind of the blanket recommendation that kind of the supplement that everyone should be taking right now, as I said, is vitamin D. So that blanket recommendation from Public Health England is a 10 microgram or 400 international unit vitamin D supplement. That's what everyone should be taking. Like I said, that might vary depending on your personal circumstances. All other supplements are on a case-by-case basis. And that might come down to, for example, if you're in perimenopause and you're having really heavy bleeding, you may be losing more iron and therefore you're at higher risk of iron deficiency. If that sounds really familiar, I urge you to go get a blood test to check your iron levels. And then if it comes back and you're deficient and you're low, you should be advised to then start taking some iron supplements. If we start taking supplements and we don't need them, they can do more harm than good. They're not sweet. Some of them might taste good, but they're not sweet. And it's so important that we're taking the ones that we need, because if you're taking iron supplements and you don't need them, for example, that can lead to constipation, and that's really not a very pleasant symptom. And similarly, I'm seeing people ask questions about things like magnesium as well. It's a really common one that I get asked about, actually. The amount of magnesium in our food these days is slightly lower than it used to be in the past. But actually, if you're having a healthy, balanced diet that's got whole grains in it, it's got beans, seeds, nuts, some proteins in it as well, it's balanced overall, you should be getting enough magnesium. Now, if your diet is obviously missing one of those groups of food, I'd urge you to look, can you put it in through food first? I take a food first approach, supplement second. So if you can get a nutrient in through food first, that's going to be so much better, because we generally absorb nutrients better from food than we do from supplements. So if you're wondering whether you should be taking all these supplements, I think strip it back potentially and actually speak out to a health professional if you're feeling really confused. Don't just take it because your friend's taking it.
Lovely, that's very sensible advice. And I always say as well, go to Boots or go to the local Superdrug and get the cheapest there, because it's no different coming in big posh bottles which cost a lot of money than the ones that are in the generic packages. So I think you should save your resources for other things, like going out and not isolating yourself because you've done so much strength training that you want to run a marathon. Now, one of the reasons I love working with Wellbeing of Women is that they almost read my mind. So just as I was saying that about going onto the BMS website, one of the team has popped up the infographic into the chat now about understanding the risks of breast cancer. And you'll see there that, in fact, there are fewer cases of breast cancer in women with estrogen-only hormone replacement therapy delivered through the skin or transdermally. And there's risks of increased risks of women who drink more than 2 or more units of alcohol per day, women who smoke. But you will see that the biggest risk, of course, is with overweight or obesity, and it increases the factors dramatically. So pop onto the chat or go back to it later and open up that link that they've given us, the Wellbeing team have sent to you. And then you will be able to have that, and it's just on one sheet of paper. You can take it along and show your friends, show your family members, and show your GP. And the practice nurse will be a good person to target too, because she'll talk to lots of ladies too. So the other thing I wanted to mention, just as we're finishing, is that we've got lots more resources coming onto the Wellbeing website about HRT and all sorts of ways in which you can tackle menopausal problems if you're not able to take HRT as well. So do keep a watchful eye on the Wellbeing website. I'm amazed how much goes on there. Every time I look at it, and I chair the charity, there's a whole load more stuff, and I have to think, oh, where did that come from? Which is really, really exciting. So I think that I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to get reminders in a moment or two that I'm going to overrun. Mustn't do that. And I want to also spend a few moments to thank Naomi Potter, who had to leave a little bit earlier, and Lavina Mehta and Lucy Jones for all of the expertise that they so generously contributed. And so many people are showing their appreciation with very, very complimentary comments. Not just about the presentations, but about the questions and the way that we've tried to tackle all the difficult things. So just remember that when I came out of medical school, women used to disappear at the age of 50 because they were post-reproductive. And now, of course, we are going to spend a lot longer as postmenopausal women being alive. In fact, I often say I'm going to spend longer alive postmenopausal than I was reproductive. So it's so important to live well through that. And that was the whole purpose of this. It's not one size fits all. We've all got to find a thing that suits us and gives us pleasure and keeps us strong and fit and mobile and not isolated, and enjoying life. So thank you, Lucy, Lavina and Naomi, and thank you to the wonderful Wellbeing of Women team who always do such a fabulous job of hosting this, apparently effortlessly, but they put masses of work into making sure it goes smoothly. So thank you, everybody, and please come and join us for our next webinar. We have one every month, always around this time, starting at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, so you can incorporate it into your lunch break or whatever. So thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you soon. 1 month's time, please. Bye.